Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
On the show with us today, I'm so glad to have you here. This is going to be a lot of fun, just in case you didn't know. We're going to have a blast. Sharon Kendrew, who is the president and CEO of H.E.R, Inc., which is a touring company. Let me try that. A touring truck company or a tour trucking company. Well, you could say that just about any way. Yeah, all of the above.
All works.
Based out of Franklin, Tennessee, a suburb here of Nashville. Originally from upstate New York. She spent most of her life in the Boston area before relocating to Tennessee in 2016 and launched H.E.R. She has worked with artists across all genres, including Switchfoot, Meshuggah.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that one before. Dropkick Murphys, Surfaces, TobyMac, Old Crow Medicine Show, Red Bull, The Wiggles.
Yes.
And many, many others. Mom to two adult kids who I think you call the Bigs.
The Bigs.
Okay.
That's them. Uh-huh.
And two teenagers, the Littles. I get it now. She spends her free time with her family, enjoying travel and, of course, live music. Sharon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
I told you this would be fun, and we haven't even really started yet.
Haven't even started. Let's go.
You getting into the trucking industry, that's typically, well, maybe I should say this. You getting into the touring trucking industry is typically not the norm for most people, and especially a woman.
Well, yes. True.
How did that come about?
The touring or the trucking part, or both?
Let's look at both of them.
Yeah. So the trucking side, it was just really, I've been in sales my whole life. And I just answered an sales job years ago. Kind of an interesting story. Went through the interview process and didn't say too much, just listened a lot, was hired, started the week later. And I actually thought I was working for an airline. I didn't know I was working for a
really?
trucking. Yes. Turned out I was working for a trucking company. So from there, we just focused a lot on conferences and live events, did a lot of trucking for conferences and live events. Took that, it was probably about 10 years of doing that. We did trucking, a lot of conferences and live events, was in that world for a while, trade shows primarily.
Right.
One night I had one of the Bigs, at the time she was a little, was really into the Jonas Brothers.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so we saw them every time they came to town. We're at a show one night, walking through the hallway, and I looked over and I saw what I now know are road cases, which look a lot like trade show cases. Saw a bunch of labels on them, and some of the labels had our trade show competitors' names on them. I went, wow, yeah, this might be a lot like doing trade show shipping. And just started down that path, digging into it, trying to figure out how and why and where, and here we are.
I remember when I first got full-time in the business, late 70s, early 80s, and I had the opportunity to take on a tour that was called Markham and Broadway. And it was two grand pianists, piano players. And it was sponsored by Yamaha. And the deal was we had to transport these 9-foot concert grand pianos in road cases across the country and set them up in what back then were really considered community concert events. So you could be at a high school auditorium or a gymnasium, or you could be at the small theater in some, little town. And that really gave me my very first flavor of what trucking was like. Now, I had worked a couple rock and roll tours where I had to take turns driving, the box van or the bobtail truck full of band gear. But transporting 2 9-foot concert grand pianos across the country, setting them up, tearing them down, waiting for the piano tuner to show up so he can tell you that you set the piano up incorrectly. We got that a few times.
Sure.
But it's a tough job, and you spend a lot of time on the road. The people that you hire to do this really have to be a very special breed, don't they?
Gosh, they really do. They really do. And just to clarify, I don't drive trucks.
Yeah, you're right. You're the one who tells everybody where to go.
Pretty much. Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. I don't drive the trucks. And truly, we've been blessed. We've had some really amazing drivers over the years, but it is a special breed. They're gone for months on end. It's a long day. It's a long night, a lot of alone time. And your experiences with touring in the past, buses are different, right? So buses, there's more of a community. Even the driver of the bus, he's interacting with more of the people that are riding the coach. Truck drivers are riding solo. They're alone the entire time. So it really takes a special person to be able to do that and do it well.
I think one of the things you told me in a conversation we had some weeks back was that nobody really knows who the truck driver is on the tour. The truck shows up, it gets unloaded, he goes to sleep, and then it's time to load the trucks up, and he's back out on the road.
Right.
And a lot of the people on the tour, of course, as you just said, there's no socialization going on with them. That's got to be even tougher because you're part of this big rock and roll circus, for lack of better terms. And nobody even begins to understand your role in it, which is really the most vital role, which is to get that cartage from point A to point B.
Right. It is a challenge. I think especially for the drivers, if they're a little bit more extroverted, then they have a better chance of connecting. They're going to meet more people. They have to be willing to have those conversations and stepping out of their comfort zone a little bit, especially when they're in catering and just getting to know some of the people. But honestly, a great tour manager, a great production manager, they're going to make sure they're connected. They're going to make sure they're taken care of and that they're getting into that community feeling. So really, a lot of it does rely more on the management of the tour.
You started your company when?
I started High Road in 2016, right about the time that I moved to Nashville.
Gotcha. And then the pandemic hit.
And
that really took a toll on everybody in the industry.
It did.
Now we've recovered somewhat from 2016 to today. How have things changed in that world for you? Obviously, fuel prices are much higher.
Right.
What other logistical nightmares are you looking at when you put someone out on the road?
Oh, logistical nightmares. That's a good question. Well, interestingly, when we first started, a lot of the touring we were doing was in box trucks. We just found this real niche market. We had a lot of artists that didn't need a full semi, but had too much to tow in the trailer behind their bus.
Right.
And it really was, it was not actually intentional, but it was just a direction we wound up going in to fulfill a need. So we were pretty busy with box trucks for the first couple years. We started, then the pandemic hit. We pretty much just, we, like everybody else, I think, we just went bare bones, got rid of everything. Coming out of the pandemic, so many things had changed in terms of availability, supply chain, pricing. It wasn't just fuel. The price of a box truck about doubled from before the pandemic. So when we started getting those calls for box trucks again, there was just no way we were going to spend that kind of money on a box truck at that point. And the waiting list was probably about a year old for a new one. So we went back into semis, stuck with the semis. So that was something that changed. Some of our previous clients we couldn't work with any longer if that was what they were looking for. Getting equipment was really, really difficult.
Getting drivers?
Not really.
Really? You know, one of the things I heard was that when the pandemic hit, all those tour managers, production managers, stage managers, carpenters, riggers, electricians, they all went out and had to find real jobs.
That's right.
You know, and then all of a sudden touring kind of comes back into play and they're like, yeah, I mean, I get a steady paycheck and I have a 401k now and, you know,
benefits, they're happy.
Yeah, why would I leave that to go back out and do this?
Yeah, it turns out I like my wife. I kind of want to stay home with her.
Sleep in the same bed every night.
Right.
Yeah. But with the truck drivers, it wasn't necessarily the case?
No, not necessarily with us. We did maintain, so we have another division up in Boston that my oldest son runs that does.
One of the bigs.
One of the bigs.
Yeah.
One of the bigs. That we still continue to focus on freight up there. So we do general freight shipping. So we did a lot of that during the pandemic. We started doing some retail because retail just went through the roof.
When you say retail, what do you mean by that?
Retail. We were doing some new store installs. We were doing a lot of shipping for new store setups because it was one of the things you could do during the pandemic was go shopping, go to Target. There was a lot of people at Target.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of that during the pandemic. But most of the drivers, they did stay driving with us or elsewhere. You know, one of our best drivers, he was delivering chickens, not for us. And I think that was different from what some of the other experiences have been because there was still a need for truck drivers and there were still trucks on the road, probably more so, honestly, during the pandemic because of the supply chain and people needing more and more and more, just being home and the consumption. Yeah.
I read an article, in fact, just a couple days ago that I pulled up here from The Who's Roger Daltrey, the lead singer of The Who. And he was commenting about he's not sure if The Who will ever tour the U.S. again. And he goes into detail and he said it's not only the insurance matters because the insurance costs are going up, but and this is where I quote him, most of the big bands doing arena shows, by the time they do their first show and rehearsals and get the staging and crew together, all the buses and the trucks and the hotels, you're upwards of $600,000 to $1 million in the hole. To earn that back, if you're doing a 12-show run, you don't even start to earn it back until the 7th or 8th show. That's just how the business works. The trouble now is, if you get COVID after the first show, you've lost that money.
That's right.
Is that still an ongoing concern in your world? Okay, great. You get the phone call. We're going to go out and do a tour. I know it's going to be X number of dates, 20, 30, 90 dates or whatever it is. And then that happens. The lead singer gets COVID or the guitarist or everything has to shut down. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, you know, we've been really, really lucky. Our last 2022, I think we only had one tour where COVID became an issue. And what the artist did was they just took that 2-week time period, rerouted the dates, threw them on the end of the tour, and just took a little bit of downtime. There's really not a lot that you can do if it's a 2-week period, depends on where they are in the country. By the time they bring everything back, bring all the production back, unload it, it's time to reload it again and send it back out again. So it's really not even worth it.
So you basically, if something like this happens, you just pause.
We just pause.
And take a deep breath.
Yeah, I might send the driver home. He'll take the truck. He'll take the production with him.
Right.
Or he'll stay put.
Yeah.
You know, he might just wind up spending a couple of weeks out on the West Coast, which is really economically makes so much more sense than the fuel he'd have to burn to come all the way back to Nashville.
Absolutely, because you're not spending that, whatever it is, $5, $6 some odd dollars a gallon for diesel.
Exactly right.
Because we're not talking about putting regular gas in your car.
Right.
These are diesel trucks like the buses.
Yes.
And it's more.
And it's heavier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they consume more.
They consume a lot more.
And then you also have the issue where in some states you have to pay taxes or permits or fees to travel through.
Oh, there's lots of fun things that we experience. There's permits. A lot of this, interestingly enough, you don't know till you don't know. When I first started out, I didn't know any of that. I was in trucking. I thought I knew what I was doing. I really didn't.
Baptism by fire?
Exactly that. Exactly that. Trying to figure out how to get a permit to drive through a state at 3:00 in the morning.
Oh.
Yeah. I learned quick.
I had a tour back, in fact, 1990. This is how far back I go, even farther than that. But we had a tour bus that left Nashville to go meet us up in Calgary, Alberta. Then we were going to drive across
Canada.
the country. So he's deadheading up to Calgary. And he gets to the Canadian border and they go, "Who are you and what are you doing?" We didn't know there was certain paperwork we had to fill out
Oh my gosh.
to get an empty tour bus across the border to meet us. And we almost didn't have a tour bus because Canada steps in and they go, "We have our own buses, you know. Why aren't you using one of our buses?"
That's right.
Because it's our bus. This is the bus we use all the time. It's our home. You run into those problems?
Yes, actually. We had one issue. We started running into Canada a few years ago. We had one issue with, as tour was getting closer to the Canadian date, found out our driver had some legal issues. And
air quotes.
Air quotes. They stop you. It just, you can't have a DUI within the past 10 years. You can't owe back child support. You can't have a tax with tax liens, things like that. So we had to fly another driver up, take over. And I said, "It's your responsibility to get from point A to point B. You can meet the truck back up again when you get there.
Yeah. If
you don't show up, you don't have a job, but I'm not paying for you to get over there." And he moseyed his way over and made it. But we had another tour, really interesting, newer tour manager on the tour. They got to the Canadian border and they didn't know what the rules were as far as getting people over the border. They had 3 or 4 people on their bus that couldn't cross.
Oh.
They canceled their Canadian dates.
But that's all part of the logistics in the touring world, and trucking and busing is no exception.
No exception. No. And in some of them you realize we have a division that really focuses on the tour that is going from the trailer behind the bus and moving up into a semi. We call it touring up.
I like that. That's nice.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Our tagline is "Let's tour it up." So we focus on that, and with that, we do some hand holding with those tour managers, production managers that don't know what the rules are, what the rules of engagement are, what they need to know before they cross a border, or how to load that semi. Those are the things we hold hands with. Yeah.
We're going to take a break, get a word in for one of our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to have some more. To me, this is very interesting and exciting.
Glad you think so.
Conversation. Hey, I live that world. Anybody on the road lives this world.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have some more conversation with Sharon Kendrew.
Hey, this is Don Muskies, production manager for Alanis Morissette, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
As a musician, you have a dream, that vision of what success looks like for you. Though it's not only about the money, money is part of it. Whether you've been extremely successful or you're just striving to maintain a regular cash flow, you need a plan. Money Concepts can help you develop a customized plan to achieve the financial stability and success you want. For over 40 years, Money Concepts has been providing holistic financial planning services to individuals, families, and business owners. As an independent firm, Money Concepts and their associates are committed to always represent the best interest of the client. It's really about a committed, benevolent interest in them personally. This independence, coupled with that committed, benevolent interest, means they represent you, the client, not a product supplier. It's not about selling products, it's about helping you achieve success. To learn how this can benefit you, contact my buddy, John Adams, with Money Concepts at 737-867-9309. That's 737-867-9309. You can also email John at jadams@moneyconcepts.com.
Hey, this is Jack Sharkey, host of Between the Notes. Take a break from all the turmoil in the world and join us each week as we explore the magic, mystery, and beauty of music. Between the Notes, a podcast dedicated to everything music, available everywhere you get your podcasts.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here, Nashville, Tennessee, with Sharon Kendrew. She is the president and CEO of High Road Inc., a tour trucking company based in Franklin, Tennessee, the pretty part of Nashville.
It is indeed.
I want to jump back into the conversation a little bit. You were talking about, we're talking about international touring, getting from the States to Canada, and I'm going to assume Mexico's the same way. I've only done one tour of my life in Mexico, and we flew, and it was a very interesting time. You'll just have to read about it in the book someday. But you mentioned a production manager or a tour manager not knowing all of the rules and the particulars. Does that become an education process for you to provide all of a sudden for them?
It does. It does. When they're going, obviously they know their job. They know what they're doing. So I'm not saying in any way that they don't understand what the role that they were hired for, but there are some things that are a little bit different when you're loading a trailer versus loading a semi. Some things you need to be aware of. And so we do, before we have a tour, we do a pre-tour Zoom call. We bring in the lead driver or the only driver. It's usually, if they're touring up, it's usually one semi. So we bring that individual in on the Zoom call, and we go through our list of questions with them, answer any questions that they have, try to help them understand. Sometimes they'll ask about space and dimensions of the interior of the truck, load bars, straps, ramps, what kind of ramps we have available, what they might need for the tour, things like that, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything like permits or border crossing, we take care of that. Last tour that we have actually going right now didn't have a broker on the Canadian side. So,
and that's important, isn't it?
It's a little important.
Yeah.
Only if you want to get your stuff over.
Right.
Other than that, it's not a big deal.
Yeah. And that's changed a lot from, like, say, the first time I went across into Canada, which was 87, 86, somewhere around there, to today. It's definitely not easier. In fact, it's probably more difficult to get across the border now. Of course, back then, if you had a driver's license and you had a temporary work permit, a green card, whatever, you could cross the border. Now it's a passport, and you better have, I'm assuming, a work visa of some kind and the permits to go with everything.
Well, we don't require work visas to go across,
Okay.
But we do need they need an e-manifest, which is an ACI and an ACE, need one going in, one coming out.
To make sure that what goes in comes out?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we don't deal with the brokerage side. There's some great people that do that.
Yeah.
So they take care of all the carnets and the international paperwork I don't need to know. But we do take care of the manifests, getting it in, getting it out. You have to have certain PARS numbers, PAPS numbers. There's things like that you need to know about. So we'll walk with a tour manager or a production manager through that and just explain the information we need from them to make that happen.
Then the other thing that kind of popped into my head while we were having this conversation is the loading and the unloading of the trucks.
Sure.
The packing or unpacking.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bit of Tetris, isn't it?
It's a great bit of Tetris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who does that? Is it the production manager and the local stage crew? Is it the truck driver supervising? Because ultimately, the truck and the cartage that's inside of it, it's really your responsibility, I would think.
It is, yeah. So it is the crew's responsibility and the production manager's responsibility to load it. It is the driver's responsibility to make sure it's loaded properly.
Oh.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that the truck driver really needs to be standing there when it's secured.
Well, not just secured, but the truck has axles, and he has to make sure the right amount of weight is balanced on the right axle. If they get pulled over at a weigh station and they're even if the truck can hold 40,000 pounds, if it's not balanced over the axles, they will stop that truck and make him unload and reload it till it's balanced properly.
And that's something you don't necessarily want to do on your own.
Or at all.
Yeah, or at all.
Really?
Yeah.
Usually there's not enough downtime in between venues that you really have a lot of time to stop on the side of the road and repack a truck. So it is his responsibility to make sure everything is secure, that it's in there tightly, that the load bars, the straps are secure, and that the load is properly balanced with their weight.
And that brings up another topic of conversation, and that is the driver. His or her sleep pattern is totally different than anybody else's.
It's very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're literally night owls.
They have to be. They have to be. When they're when they're loaded and then they leave that dock, they're driving straight through to wherever they have to go next. And the hours of service now is 10 hours of driving in a 14-hour period.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have to have 10 hours off. So when we're routing a tour, when we're looking at routing, we're very careful and cautious to make sure I know what the daily mileage run that a driver is going to do, how many hours it's going to take him to do that, and whether or not he's going to get safely to the next venue. We will fly in a second driver if we have to, if the mileage is a little bit longer. But yeah, they're pretty much well rested by the time the truck is loaded and they're ready to go.
You shared a story with me a while back in another conversation that you and I had when we talk about truck drivers really becoming family.
Yeah.
And
I know where you're going with this one.
And I believe you said his name, John.
John.
Yeah.
Oh, John, yeah.
And this was a very unusual situation, but what a lot of people don't understand, especially in the touring industry, the rock and roll music touring business, we don't shut down for anything. The show must go on. That adage is ever present.
Yeah.
But in a situation with John, for a moment had to stop. Well, everybody kind of gathered their thoughts and said, okay, what are we going to do? Do you mind sharing that?
I'll try.
Yeah.
It's emotional. It's a really emotional story. John has been with us, since the beginning. He's more than a driver to us, really.
He's family.
He's family.
Yeah.
And he's part of the team and he's part of the company. And there's not much he couldn't say to me and there's not much I couldn't say to him.
Right.
We've walked together through a lot of different things. John's oldest son was murdered last year. Ooh.
Wow.
I still have trouble saying it. Oh, gosh.
And that is something that those of us in the industry, that's difficult to wrap your head around. I think it's difficult for anybody to wrap their head around that when you lose a family member. But when you're on the road touring and you're hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from home.
Yeah. And you get that call.
Yeah.
And you get that call. So, he was on tour with Collective Soul and Switchfoot. And both tour managers, John reached out to me first. My next phone call was the tour managers from both camps. And, they were just amazing. Amazing. They were like, get him home.
Yeah. But once again, this gets down to this is family. This is family. And
I told you I'd have a hard time
I understand.
about this.
but I think it shows, well, first of all, it shows the love that you have for your people.
Yeah.
But I think it also shows that these tour managers, these production managers were like, let's do what we have to do.
Right.
They weren't worried about the show.
No.
At that moment.
Absolutely not.
They were worried about their focus, their concern was getting John home where he needed to be with his family.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So we did.
And at the same time, everybody's juggling balls and spinning plates and
right. This is just not something that you're expecting to deal with in the midst of a tour, and those things do happen, but it's how you handle it.
But there was kind of a cool thing that happened
there was.
When he came back out on the road, and you told me the story, and that's where it got me when you told me that not only did they embrace him with open arms when he came back, but now all of a sudden he's literally in the spotlight.
He is. So John's been in the music industry for years. All kinds of roles, had a band at one point.
Yeah.
Guitar tech. It's funny, we talk about it. He's a musician who happens to drive a truck.
Yeah. Well, listen, there's a lot of musicians out there who probably drive trucks.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait tables,
yeah,
whatever.
Exactly.
So we sent John home for a couple of weeks. He went back out on the road, and it was right around his birthday. John Foreman of Switchfoot called our John, out on stage. And I don't even know how the sequence of events happened at that point, but they invited him out on stage and they wound up having him play guitar for a song.
How cool is that?
Yeah, it was.
Ladies and gentlemen, our truck driver.
Our truck driver.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
They had him play guitar out on stage. Within about a week, John was on the set list. Every night, John had one song that he would go out and he'd play guitar and he would sing with the band. And it just, it made all the difference in the world to him. Yeah. And us. Yeah.
We're going to take another break, get another word in for another one of our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to have some more conversation with Sharon Kendrew.
Hi, this is Ray Miko. Join us as we have a look beyond the mics and lights here on the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
When you have a Korg synth at your fingertips, the possibilities are endless. Be it digital, analog modeling, altered FM, wave sequencing, or the multi-engine synth, Korg gives you easy access to a variety of features to help you get the perfect sounds quickly. Whether you're a professional musician or just starting out, Korg truly has a synthesizer to help you express yourself. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products to create new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives, whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here on the business side of music, Sharon Kendrew, who is the president and CEO of High Road Inc., a tour trucking company based out of Franklin, Tennessee. We touched on it briefly earlier in this conversation, where things were when you began in 2016, getting through COVID, and now here we are a few years later. Pandemic seems to finally be going away, we hope. What do you see is the future for the rock and roll touring business? And I had mentioned a little bit earlier that it seems to be tougher to find the people. It seems to be tougher with the logistics. Do you see that easing up? Do you see that changing? How is this all going to evolve in the next year or two or three?
It's an interesting question. We've been watching it a lot. I think that people are a little concerned about the economy. So the tours are definitely a little leaner. We're not seeing 2022 was just insane. It was insane.
In what aspect?
Everybody was out on the road.
Okay.
And because everybody went out on the road, the routing was nuts because they couldn't get the venues to fall in sequence of what made sense for them.
Sure.
And so you were zigzagging all over the country.
Or as we used to call it, dartboard touring.
That's a great term for 2022.
The booking agent would just throw dartboards and hope that it hit a city that somewhat made sense.
Happen to have a venue available.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Yeah. Yeah. So 2022 was just crazy. We would get tours on a Friday for a Monday tour. Needed a truck.
You would get a phone call on a Friday for a tour that was going on Monday. Holy cow.
Because they didn't have availability. The tours were booked. They had somebody. They backed out at the last minute. It was crazy. It was crazy.
Has that calmed down?
Oh, yeah, very much so. Yeah. So this year, very different story. Last year, we would get a call on a Friday. We'll sign a contract now. We don't care what it costs. Okay. Awesome. This year, rates have really dropped. It's become more competitive. And some of that is following the freight industry. Freight has settled down quite a bit. The rates have dropped. A lot of trucking companies have left the trucking business. A lot of companies are closing their doors.
Wow.
Yeah, more of the guys who have one or two trucks are starting to close their doors because the freight rates are so low, they're barely even covering the cost of fuel. So we're feeling some of that on the concert and the rock and roll side for sure. And then with the economy, people tightening their belts a little bit, seeing what's happening in the in our economy in this country in general. It's not And I'm grateful it's not as crazy as last year. I wouldn't want to repeat that every year. But I could see it. I could see people being very cautious over the next 2 to 3 years.
The cost of tickets, and I speak from personal experience because my wife and I purchased a couple tickets to go see an upcoming show. And the sticker shock was just mind-blowing.
Yes.
But there's the other side of me when I put on that tour manager or that production manager hat. When I realize there's still a cost of doing business out there for these people that are on the road touring, for folks such as yourself. Do you see that settling down at any point? Or do you think this is just kind of an ongoing, tug of war?
The cost of tickets?
The cost of the whole touring
experience. The whole touring cost?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I really don't see things, it depends on what you're really looking at. When you're looking at the tours, how many trucks are they taking? How many buses are they taking?
Is that scaling back at all, or is that staying the same?
I haven't really seen it scale back yet.
Really? Okay.
The only places I've really seen it scale back is if somebody's looking at that, going from a trailer up to a semi, didn't really anticipate the cost of that. And they'll say, okay, we're going to scrap a couple of things and do away with it. We've seen almost some of the opposite. We've seen tours where they'll book 3 trucks to go out and they're on the road 2 weeks and realize they need more lighting or something. And we did that. Oh, that was a nightmare trying to find a 4th truck for that tour 2 weeks into the tour.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not really seeing people cut back necessarily. I don't know. I'm not sure where they would.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because I remember a tour that I was production manager on back in 1987, and that exact same thing happened.
Yeah.
We were playing we had gone from playing clubs, which didn't need a production manager, barely needed a tour manager, to all of a sudden we're doing theaters, small theaters, 1,000, 1,500, maybe 2,000 seats. To literally almost within 2 weeks, arenas, festivals. And it was like, we don't have enough sound. We don't have enough lights. Okay.
Yeah.
And now how do we get that and have a catch up to the tour and then maintain that? You're right. Now all of a sudden you're scratching your head because you're going, I need another semi.
Right. And not just I need another semi, but gosh, where's your production coming out of? I remember getting that call, and it was a Thursday. And I'm going to need another semi. How soon could you get one? I said, well, where's it going? Nashville or Vegas? I'm not sure. I said, well, that's...
There's only about 2,000 mile difference there.
Yeah. There's a big difference between Nashville and Las Vegas. And so by Monday, we figured out it was Nashville. And we still didn't have a truck. So for the first 2 weeks, we were using, tour trucking is really different from freight trucking. Those guys are... the trucks are equipped differently. They know what they have to do. Freight guys, when they're driving trucks, they drop and they roll. They get in, they get out, they're done. They're not going to sit and wait. They're paid by the mile. For the first 2 weeks, we had to hire freight trucks because there was just no availability anywhere in the country. So we had a guy come in, pick up at a venue, drop it at the next one, and he'd leave.
Oh, my gosh.
Then we would get another driver to come in, pick up at the next venue.
So there was no acclimation. It was just, just trying to make all the dots connect until you could.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Right. Right up until we found, we were hustling it. We finally found our driver with a truck, got her there. That one was a female. She was amazing. Got her out there and she stayed on the tour. And that one ran another, another 4 months after that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a long one.
Holy cow.
Mm-hmm.
People want to find more about your trucking company.
Yeah.
How can they do that? Where do they go?
Well, we have a website, highroadusa.com. We are on Instagram. We are on LinkedIn. You'd had to ask. Instagram, I think we're High Road USA. I am on Instagram, Sharon High Road. You can follow me there. We're on all the social media. Facebook, does anybody still use that? I don't know. I think we're still on Facebook.
I do. I'm old school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.